Me, a bro.
Yep.
He, a dude.
That's good stuff. All right. Let's try it. Okay. Welcome to the We Will Journey podcast. We're talking about faith and life as it happens, and not the glossy exterior we wish it was.
Oh.
What, man? What did I do wrong?
I think you said it's because all the things I was thinking about before. But we can edit that. You got that part good.
Oh.
You got it good. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, just...
Now it's your turn.
Good.
Yeah.
Wait. We're going to get under the surface. I should have said all those things before. We should have waited down and dirty until after we read this part.
Okay.
Okay. Wait. We get under the surface and explore the down and dirty. Okay. Maybe we should. It doesn't have to be word for word, right?
No. I mean, I gave an interpretation.
Okay. All right. We get under the surface and explore the down and dirty of life as it pertains to our beliefs, our relationships, politics, and absolutely everything else.
Oh, there we go. That was good. All right.
When I'm dead, laying in my coffin, all my friends all gather round. They can say I'm just sleeping good alone, the sweet peace I have found.
3, 2, 1.
Good morning, Seth, and afternoon.
Good morning to you. Yes. Good afternoon to me.
Yes.
Good evening to those in Australia.
Other places. Yeah.
Actually, in Australia, isn't it 2 a.m. or something?
It's early morning hours in Australia as far as I remember. Although I have not looked into it lately, I haven't thought about that recently, so I can't tell you for sure what time it is. But I remember when we talked to our friend, I think at 7 a.m, it was like 11 p.m. there. So if I remember correctly, but
yeah, you should just be glad I don't live in Australia. Can you imagine us trying to figure out times?
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just crazy, man.
That would be crazy. Yeah. So Seth, what I want to talk about this morning, because we had great intentions, didn't we, with Lent? We had really, really good intentions.
Yes.
And the first few days of it, I think, went really well. But beyond that, we kind of got off that path of daily recordings. I don't know if you ever got back onto your Lent thing at all. So what I thought we could do today is just kind of recap Lent just a little bit, how it went for us, what some of our takeaways were from it, and just share just a little bit so people that maybe chimed in to a few of those little clippings, those little snippets of Lentness of a few weeks ago can kind of hear what our journey ended up being like. How does that sound to you?
That sounds great, as Tony the Tiger likes to say.
Yes. Yeah, that was...
But he says more like a great.
Yeah,
I did the R in the back on accent. Great, not like that, or a great.
Yeah, that's
more just
that's not
great.
It. That was not it at all. The last
just
one
more of an
was closer.
R. Yeah.
Yeah, that was closer. Well, Seth, remind people what your goal was for Lent. Let's start with that.
My goal was to strive for world peace, just like any other Miss Universe. It's what we're all kind of in. We're all in this for the same cause, man.
Yeah.
No, my goal was to do a half an hour of guitar, playing, practicing, worshiping, and half an hour of Bible time per day.
Uh-huh. And was that something that you felt like you achieved over Lent? Or how long did that last?
That lasted up until my trip to, kind of spontaneous trip to Ukraine, and then after that, kind of fell apart, and then never got back on the wagon. And I was kind of starting to, and then I got sick for a week, and I mean, there's always excuses. There is life, I mean, that happens that does change things, obviously, and that's part of the reason. I wanted to do it is because I always have had such a hard time being consistent, especially with like Bible time, where it's been more of a roller coaster throughout my spiritual journey, where there's been times where it's like I had a hunger for God's word, and then there's been other times where I just have the hardest time having my own personal time in the Bible. But yeah, it's still something, as you can hear by my journey through Lent, it's still something I'm working on with the consistency, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's difficult with anything, and I think that was kind of one of my takeaways actually for this whole thing was the fact that when doing something like Lent, it's good to be flexible, right? Like I think life does intervene from time to time, and for one reason or another, we can't maybe do everything exactly the way we maybe hoped we could. And so we just have to be flexible with it, which I found true in what I was doing, which was I had this idea from a book that I read called The Sacred Year to do a $2 a day budget for food. And overall, I achieved that, but there were definitely days where, I just, for one reason or another, I really couldn't do it without just a lot of inconvenience, either to myself or other people. So the way I kind of worked around that was I tried to always eat similar stuff to my Lent, we'll call it a diet. Because what I did on the front end was I budgeted groceries for the entire duration of Lent, and so that way I kind of knew what I had to work with, and so which was some rice and beans and sweet potatoes, regular potatoes. I had some sausage that my wife ground up, and which was inexpensive for us, and so that worked into it. I really feel like I ate like a king, actually. It was just that I had a simple diet, It wasn't...
Yeah.
It didn't have all of the frill, It was just more basic. And I lost a little bit of weight over that period of time.
Cool.
And so that was good. And I felt better in general. I pretty much stayed away from gluten. I don't want this to be like a discussion on health per se, but gluten, dairy, and sugar were things that I kind of cut out of my diet to make this whole thing work. And so consequently, I lost a little weight and I felt pretty good. And those are things that I'm probably going to continue. beyond Lent. And so anyways, overall, I felt like Lent was a success. Did it draw me closer to God? I think that's one of the questions Yeah. So Lent isn't about losing weight or necessarily lifestyle changes. It's about did what we do or what we did actually draw me closer to God, and I don't know if I know the answer to that question. So I would say yes and no. Like in that, like I still had to cook food, right? So it wasn't, with a fast, you kind of give up eating in general.
Right.
And you ideally would spend that time then with God instead of cooking and eating. And so I still cooked, so there were definitely ways that I now just kind of changed. I think I changed my relationship with food, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, it makes sense that you can do that. I don't know what that led to. Like you kind of have a love-hate relationship with food now, or you have more of a is it a bit standoffish, like a little bit like food sleeps on the other side of the bed now, or
So I think that a lot of times in the past I would eat to eat. I ate for the sake of eating. I wasn't really hungry. It was just kind of like a comfort thing. I would just be bored or whatever, and I like food. And so I kind of, through Lent, was able to readjust that process in my life of just eating for the sake of eating and being more comfortable with maybe being hungry, feeling that urge to eat but not eating. So I think that was really good. Probably led to some of the weight loss. And so in that, there were times that I would have maybe been cooking things, or eating, that I did spend time with God. That I, instead of doing that, I was praying or reading or something. My lifestyle in general is pretty focused on being relational with God most of the time, not all the time. But I do try to carve out time every day to be relational in some way with God. And so that probably did not change, considerably over Lent. But I did incorporate some new things, which have been really good. And I think I probably incorporated them prior to Lent starting, but just some, mainly prayer. On the prayer side of things, I did more guided prayer instead of just me talking to God. I did more, I've utilized some apps that have been really good. So I can share those. If you want to know what those are, I could talk to you about those just a little bit.
Yeah, man.
One of the apps that I've been using is called Pause, Pause. That's by John Eldridge. So I started using that quite a while ago. Not for sure exactly how long ago it's been. Let me see if it says on the app. No, I don't know if it does right here.
37 and a half days ago.
I've done 42 pauses. It'll actually tell me when I started this here. I started this
2012.
I started it in December. So, but I only did it once in December and once in January. I didn't really start getting more faithful with it till February, March, then April. But it's kind of cool. It tells you how many pauses you've done. So I've done 42 pauses for a total of 296 minutes.
Mm.
And my longest streak was 6 days. And my current streak is 1 day. So, but that app actually lets you go up to currently a 10-minute pause, where the front end of it is breathing. So you kind of take a little time to do some deep breathing. John Eldridge then incorporates a lot of scripture into the pause, where he reads scripture to you. And then you can choose about halfway through that 10-minute pause, what your focus will be. Normally has like 3 different options, like, faith could be one. I'm just trying to think there's 2 different 10-minute ones. So faith, worship, they're not coming to me right now. But anyways, there's some different ones there that you can choose from. So then there's another app called Lectio 365. Lectio is spelled Lectio. So I did that, not a lot, just a little bit, mainly with one of my friends. We would do that about once a week. We've kind of started praying together once a week, and we utilize that app. It's kind of like liturgy. So think of it kind of like a liturgical service with moments to pray. So as you kind of go through the liturgy every day, then it gives you opportunity to pray in between liturgy, essentially. So that's been really cool. And then another app is called Centering Prayer. And actually, so when my friend and I get together, we do all 3 apps. We'll start with maybe Lectio, and then we'll go to pause, and then we always conclude with Centering Prayer. And so that has been kind of my new prayer routine. And I don't get to one of those every day, but I try to at least maybe do that pause app on a pretty regular basis. And I have found that just really super helpful, because talks a lot about worry and anxiety, giving things over to God, really just diving deep into your relationship with Jesus. So it's just kind of being mindful of that stuff, reminding yourself like, hey, whatever it is I'm worrying about today, I can just give that to God. I can focus on my relationship with Jesus. And then it kind of leads you into, maybe worship or, whatever it is. So, yeah. So yeah, Lent, man, was the first time I've ever done Lent. Didn't grow up really practicing anything for Lent. I think being in this world of chaplaincy obviously opens you up to just more ecumenical type stuff, that now you're trying to understand some of your peers and what they do in their lives, and what's meaningful to them. And so it's been just super eye-opening for me, and just really helped me see that, not only do we have just a ton in common with our brothers and sisters from other denominations, they really have just a lot to offer us as evangelicals. And so this Lent season has been enriching for me. I could never, Seth, I could never go back, right? I can't go back to where I was like a year or 2 ago, That's one of the things that I've kind of learned, cumulatively, with just the different things that I've been doing. Like, I would never want to go back to, not that I was narrow-minded necessarily. It wasn't necessarily that, but I'd just been exposed to more, right? So I've been exposed to more things, and I was open to them before. I just hadn't really been exposed to them. And So every opportunity I have, just like this last 40 days of Lent, is just an opportunity for me to grow in ways that I've not grown before, just haven't thought of it before. And so, anyways, that's been pretty cool. Yep, that's how it's going to sound.
That is cool, man. And I mean, a number of things I was thinking about as you were talking, and what you brought to mind. Also as you talk about the food and how that whole part doesn't necessarily bring you closer to God. But I think it's just so cool, though. The more I have, thought about my life and spiritual journey, is the more I think about it in like a holistic manner, and how everything is kind of, spiritually, physically, mentally, it is kind of all connected. We are spiritual beings. And I do think, like you were saying, feeling better because of your food choices or whatever, I'm sure that also affects, then your motivation, how you treat people.
Right.
And probably your spiritual walk, whether it's like totally consciously or not or whatever, but I don't know, I thought about that in just the part of my journey, even though my I didn't go through it as consistently as you did for the whole Lent period. I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is, as Christ was here on earth doing ministry, going through life, is I do think, because you brought up, things that happen, events that happen in our lives that kind of maybe throw us out of our normal routine. And even like something like Lent, you want to be consistent in whatever you're doing, but then there's something that comes up and it throws you out of that, and you're all of a sudden for a couple of days maybe not true to the thing you're committing yourself to. But it seems like, I think in Jesus' walk, in Jesus' life, he was being guided by the Spirit, right? And it seemed like there was just like things that came up, and in that moment and in that time period, that's just what he was doing, and he was all in with it. But then when there was times of quiet, then he was getting away to the Lord, to his Father, and having time with God the Father, right? And in quietness, and drawing that out, or seeking that out, sorry. And I feel like for me too, in my spiritual life, that I want that, and that's what I strive for, and that's one of the things that I want to learn and build upon, is like that idea of, spiritual disciplines are super important. And I think it's sad if we get too far away from that and say, there's not a lot of value in being consistent in quiet times and things like that. But at the same time, like ultimately we need to be guided by the Spirit. And if there's something that comes up, like I don't think, Jesus is eating dinner with Zacchaeus and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need to go have my 15-minute quiet time, man. Like,
dude,
like I think
I gotta run.
Yeah. Like, I think he was all in that moment, right? Or,
Yeah.
And that's what I guess I'm trying to learn, is like when something comes up and it's like, okay, God, I think I'm being obedient to you in this, and just try to listen to the Spirit and follow him. And it might be that you are then kind of at a point where you are in action and busy, but still, following the Spirit's guidance. And then after that time of busyness is over, then you really need to go back and recharge and have that quiet with God.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
it's gotta all come back to being guided by the Spirit, right? It can't
Right.
just be, with the thing like Lent, Paul saying he became all things to all people, and that's why when things like Lent come up, yeah, I do think it's important not to be totally imprisoned by that. So then if someone invites you over for dinner, a neighbor or whatever, and you've been trying to connect to them for months, and then you're like, sorry, man, I'm not eating.
I only have my oatmeal and banana pancake.
Yeah, it's like,
I cannot come over.
Call me in 90 days when Lent is over. Like,
that's right.
That's maybe not what's best in that moment,
Right. Well, Lent is only 40, so you wouldn't have to worry about a 90-day hiatus, but
maybe you do a double Lent. Maybe you're doing a double, triple,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, Lent did not supersede the gifts of my wife and children, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a ski trip over Lent, and on that ski trip, I ate the food that my wife made for the trip, and I didn't make her make me a bunch of extra food, so I could, I tried to kind of stick within some parameters, and not go hog wild, but at the same time, we just enjoyed our trip, we just enjoyed our time together. I enjoyed my wife, my children, the opportunity to be on a mountain skiing with them, and just all the cool things that happened, over that trip, and just enjoy that. And like you were talking about, Jesus probably was really, really intentional with the people that he encountered and the times that he had with those people. And, so we don't neglect all of God's gifts, right? To adhere to some diet, or whatever it is. We enjoy the opportunities that we have with one another, the opportunities that we just have to enjoy creation, and and then we try to be faithful at the same time to some of these things we're trying to do for spiritual growth. And that's what it's about, right? It's about spiritual growth.
Yeah, and I mean, there could be times where that thing that you're committing to, or the fasting you're doing, supersedes, maybe a relationship that's being built, or that is also God is using that in someone else's life, where they're like, oh wow, you're really committed to this thing. That's really powerful. Tell me more about that. But I do think, there's also that precedent, like when Jesus talks about fasting, right? He says, like, don't make yourself look horrible, so everyone's like, oh, you must be suffering.
I was just thinking about that as you were saying that. Yeah.
You look so bad, man. What are you doing? Like, oh, I'm suffering for the Lord. And they're like, oh, you're so holy.
Yeah.
Tyler, you're only eating beans?
Oh, I eat a lot more than beans. One of the things I was saying, I was really spoiled because Natalie makes like all kinds of good things, right, that are super cheap, like from our garden. And so I didn't feel guilty about eating candied jalapenos, which I have like jars and jars of. So that
those grow on plants? I didn't even know that.
Not the candied version, but she doctors them up. And so I did not feel bad about eating those. I also ate sauerkraut, which my wife makes, which is really good. Homemade sauerkraut's better than the can, a lot better than that canned stuff.
Yes, I can attest to that.
Yeah, but anyways, so I ate wonderfully throughout this time. It didn't feel like a sacrifice in that sense.
So you didn't suffer at all, is what you're saying?
No, no, absolutely not. I did not suffer at all. There was no suffering involved in what I did. There was a limiting. I limited myself from certain things. There was no suffering. But one thing that I did hear some Indian guy, some Indian guru, I can't even think who it was, but he said something to the effect of, it's healthy to go to bed hungry. And which, as an American, we seldom do that. We seldom go to bed hungry. And through Lent, I went to bed feeling I wasn't actually hungry, but in the sense that I wasn't malnourished in any way. But I went to bed a number of times feeling a little bit hungry, and that was good. Like, that was a good thing for me to do. It wasn't suffering, though. It wasn't a suffering thing. So that was kind of interesting. But, yeah.
Yeah, it goes to that idea of fasting, any kind of fasting, even if it's just, less of something, or refraining from whatever for a time, not necessarily giving up all food and drinks or whatever. The idea, at least at some points, which you've talked about, is learning or training kind of your body to be able to survive in different scenarios, and being able to go through life and go through situations or go through periods with less, going back to that Paul, saying and listing off all the things that he went through, and how he kind of learned to survive in plenty when he had plenty, and when he had less.
Well, I think one of the, the process of maturation as a follower of Jesus, right? I think that process should lead us to less world, more Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, whether it be food, whether it be even how I decorate my house, right? Or the cars I drive, or the number of times that I eat out, or, just everything. Less consumption, more Jesus. 15 years ago, I may have only been satisfied with a certain type of furniture, let's just say, right? Mm-hmm. And today, I am now satisfied with something that costs significantly less, right? Mm-hmm. Because I've matured, I've grown, I've understood that more expensive piece of furniture doesn't bring me additional happiness, mm-hmm. right? And maybe the type of clothes I wear, they don't really provide me lasting happiness. And I think that's really what Scripture points to. Jesus talks about it. Like the Samaritan woman, he talks about giving her, water that nourishes and refreshes her on an ongoing basis, right? Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh, I want that, I want that water. And she's thinking like a literal water, and he's talking about a spiritual water.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but once we kind of turn that corner, once we round that corner where we just start to see it, it takes time, right? I did not see this in my own life till, recent years, right? This has been a growth process. But once I started to see like, oh yeah, okay, there's a connection here. Some of these things that I'm pursuing only provide me with very temporary pleasure or fulfillment. And I think to some extent, as a human being, we have to experience enough of those things. We have to experience like the flip side. Like we think, okay, this is going to do this for me, mm-hmm. fulfill, pleasure, whatever it is. So we go down that path and we do it. and the fulfillment or the joy or the pleasure doesn't last as long as we thought it would. So we have to experience enough of that before we really start to maybe take Jesus's words at face value, that having a relationship with him is going to be more fulfilling. It's going to provide more pleasure. We're going to feel more joy, before we really start to dive into that in a more meaningful way. And so, I think all these things, the fruit that we should experience should be spiritual fruit. If we do Lent for 40 days and we didn't experience any spiritual fruit whatsoever, then if I would have gone through this having lost 10 pounds and that was the only thing that I got out of it, then I probably didn't do it right? Like that wasn't the point of this.
Cool, man. I'm glad especially you had maybe the whole experience of Lent, or the complete experience, more so than I did, but I'm glad we both went through that. And it does encourage me hearing you and thinking about the time that I was doing that, and I'm super excited now to get back into those things, even though it's not Lent anymore. Having a real consistent time and just accountability, doing something like this together obviously adds a new
flavor
element,
little flavor. Yeah, another layer.
I gotta get out of here.
All right, love you, man. Yeah, it was good talking.
It was amazing, like always. Love you too, bro.
Okay, peace out.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to my dad and Seth today. Please listen next week for more. Dad, do I have to say this?
Just read what I wrote.
Fine. Please listen next week for more highly intellectual conversation.
Very good. Very good.
And I'm made by hand. I've got a mother, a sister, and a brother who have gone to that sweet home. Well, I'm determined to go and see them, a good Lord, over on that distant shore. I go down to that river of Jordan just to bathe my weary soul. If I could just touch the hem of his garment, good Lord, I believe it would make me whole. When I'm dead, laying in my coffin, all my friends all gather round. They can say I'm just sleeping, good Lord, the sweet peace I have found.